Hello and welcome to the Coaching Crowd podcast with me, Jo Wheatley, and my friend and co-host Zoe Hawkins.
Hi, everybody. We're here today to talk to you about our sixth and final principle in our emotions coaching series. And this principle is you can choose your emotions. Now, we know it's not always going to feel that you can choose your emotions. So we're going to sit and demystify this one a little bit for you throughout the podcast today.
The reason that this principle is important, this concept that you can choose your emotions, is because it can nurture confidence. Because often people can feel like their emotions dominate them or are in control of them, and that often is not helpful. So it can nurture confidence. It can help them then to generate new options. So even being able to explore the possibility of what else it may be possible to feel can be empowering. It can build that emotional resilience and ultimately support somebody with their well-being.
Yeah, and this particular principle is connected to this concept that we call emotional freedom. And emotional freedom is, as we've described here, it's the ability to choose your emotional response. And you may have heard the term, we are all response able, and it's connected to that. It's like we may not be able to choose our circumstances, and we may not be able to choose sometimes even who we're with, and certainly what's happening at a time. But by almost wearing the hat of I can choose my emotions helps us to access more choices and therefore start on the path of emotional freedom. So rather than our emotions controlling us or being controlled by our emotions, it gives us more resources and more avenues to be able to think about how we want to respond to the different stimuli that creates emotions within us. So let's talk a bit more about that.
And I think that it's that question, like, what do you want to feel, or how do you want to feel? And even even saying those two things, I'm like, actually, there's quite a big difference between those two questions. But in a coaching context, having the opportunity to express what you are feeling or think you're feeling, and then the coach to kind of be able to sit there and in that non-judgmental way and kind of cut through all you already, if you've had the opportunity to express it, so how you're feeling, at that point, it can be useful to say, what would you like to feel? Because you may not have considered that. And so when I think about it, I think, oh, what a relief to actually be invited into this different space. So I can see all of that emotional noise over there. I've now been invited into another room that has nothing in it yet. And I can choose what emotion I want to sit with in that space, whether it's for, a minute, an hour, however long to explore that. And so in everyday conversations, you often don't get that. You'll often have people listening to you expressing how you feel or think that you feel, and spending time. They kind of come and meet you in that space, and you might stay there. And in coaching, what we're exploring is, and in the context of emotions coaching, is around developing a growth mindset around your relationship to your emotions.
Mm.
And so that thinking about what is growth for me in terms of my relationship to my emotions. And coaching is about choice. It's about supporting an individual to make choices in their lives that are going to honor the things that are most important to them. And that relates to our emotions as well. And it's helping clients to move out of default, or what we might call script in transactional analysis, you might call scripted, these automatic patterns that we are in, and be able to recognize, that maybe belongs to something in the past or somewhere else, but actually the choice is about the here and now. It's about the here and now and the future. And that's why, the concept of emotional freedom is so important, because it gives you an option. It gives you another space to explore that might be empowering and offer you some other possibility.
Mm. I mean, you'll be familiar with the coaching question. What do you want to do about that? When you're talking about some goals that you've got aspirations for, or some obstacles that you've met, coaching is action focused. So, okay, what would you want to do about that? And often clients will be like, I don't know. And they don't know because they still feel the way they feel about it. So it's very hard to take action if your emotional experience doesn't change to align with the action that you want to take. because it feels out of step. And I'm sure everybody here can sort of relate to those sort of circumstances where they may want to do something, but because they don't feel the way they need to feel, they can't take the action, or they don't want to take the action, or it's too hard to take the action. Whereas through emotions coaching, what we're really talking about here is getting your emotional experience in alignment so that action feels smooth, almost effortless and easy. And it's instilling the belief that that is possible. Because I don't know that many of us are brought up with the belief that you can choose your emotions, or even the skills to know how you would begin to do that. But by accepting that it's a possibility is the first step in being able to do so. And one of the things that we invite our clients to when it comes to this particular concept is to first try it on as a hat. What if? To be playful with it, because sometimes moving, as you said, Joe, to like, how do you want to feel, the client might be so stuck in their emotional experience that they don't even think that it's possible to change. So when we introduce it as a, what if you could choose how you feel right now, what choices would you be making? And sometimes the client might say, well, actually, it would feel really good if I could just be really angry for a day. Just want to be really angry. And isn't that a great place to start? Okay. And once you've experienced that, then what would you like to feel? Actually, I think I'd just like to feel peaceful about it. So sometimes this, like, how do you want to feel? There's some sequencing to it, because you may not be able to get to the ultimate destination, in one giant step.
Yeah, and I think it's important to legitimize goals that are related to emotions. Often in coaching, or clients, maybe are setting goals that are related to, I want to get a promotion at work, or I want to decide what's next for me in terms of my career. But, or not but also exploring what are the emotional elements of that goal. And that might be something that emerges out of the conversation. And so what that does is it really starts to build out the goal, and becomes something that's much clearer, actually, that gives people more clarity around their goal, the reasons that it's so important to them, what they're going to get as a payoff for achieving that goal. And that obviously can help with the motivation around it as well. So I think that's something that's important for people to develop, is their questions around how to support clients related to their emotions around things, and prioritizing it as well. So there's a lot of discounting that can go on when clients are talking about their emotions. There'll be a lot of a lot of little words that are interjected into conversations that kind of minimize it. And it's important as coaches that we can notice that, and that we can help our clients to notice it as well. Because when they start to notice it, if we discount something, it means it's important to us, but we're telling everybody else it's not that important. And sometimes that has been developed as a coping strategy because previously their experiences or needs haven't been validated. So you might not do it the first time, but we look out for patterns as coaches, in terms of communication with our clients. That might be something that you want to help a client explore. They might say something like, it doesn't really matter how I feel about it, I just need to do it. And when a client tells you that as a truth, you might want to just test that out. Is that really true for you? What might you be discounting here? Or they might say, I think focusing on this right now is the most useful thing for me to do. And so we might want to explore the opportunity cost of that, or how narrow has our client got in terms of their goal, that actually when they achieve that goal, they've realized they've missed out on some other really important parts of it. So helping our clients to break down goals into the relative elements of that can deepen the client's experience and make it a more transformational experience.
I think this principle, you can choose your emotions, is really a part of everyday self-leadership, and such an important skill to master. And what I mean by that is, if you're having an emotional experience and maybe that is boredom, for example, and you just don't realize you can choose your emotions, so you just sort of accept that you're bored. And yeah, you may try and do something about it, but you're sort of accepting that you're bored, or you're accepting that you're sad, or you're accepting that you're angry because the situation that you've been a part of, it's expected that you would feel those things. So you can just sort of accept, well, this is a normal experience that I'm having. So this is a normal emotional experience. So I'll just have it and it will get better in time. Well, yeah, and it probably will get better in time. Lots of things are processed through the course of time. But what if you don't have time to just sit there and be bored for the next 8 months, 6 months, or sad for the next however long? And just by simply asking yourself, like, how do I want to feel? You might find that you want to feel sad for a bit longer, or you want to feel angry or bored for a bit. And there might come a point in time where you're like, well, that's long enough now. So now how do I want to feel? I might want to feel hopeful or inspired, and where you want to feel will influence the action that you want to take. So if you're bored and you want to feel happy, you could go for a walk. If you're bored and you want to feel inspired, you might go and do some learning. If you're bored and you want to feel exhilarated, you might go and, I don't know, throw yourself in at a really deep learning experience, or, like, the way you want to feel will influence the action that you take. And sometimes we sort of do it the other way around, and like we take the action and we don't really know the outcome of the emotions that we're going to have. So it's this concept of being able to live life by design. Like, when you could accept or step into the possibility that you can choose your emotions, you're choosing how you would design your life and your emotional experience. And I think the reason we can choose our emotions is because emotions are connected to everything. And we talked about interlinked before. They're connected to our past, our present, our thoughts, our feelings, are connected to our values and our beliefs. And many of those things can be changed. We can change our thoughts, we can change our beliefs, we can influence our values, we can get our needs met. So therefore, we can change and choose our emotions. But I think the default is often that we can't, or we have to wait for them to change, or we have no real levers to pull when we're having an emotional experience. So the concept alone of you can choose your emotions isn't always easy for clients to grasp. And we certainly don't recommend stepping into a coaching session where your client is sharing their emotions. And you're like, well, you can choose your emotions. So what would you like to experience instead? Like, that can be very dismissive of a client's experience. So how you introduce this principle does take care and grace, but can be incredibly powerful when you do.
And like many coaching conversations, sometimes the value is in, offering a concept like this. And then if a client um, rejects that concept, but you notice something about the way that they reject it, it can be worth exploring that. So sometimes or the client might discover in conversation that actually the thought of being able to be free to choose your emotional response is too high a degree of responsibility. And so it's not actually necessarily their emotions in that sense that need to work on, but actually their relationship to responsibility. And so, but you wouldn't have necessarily got to that realization had you not gone via the route of emotions and, these particular concepts. And I think those for me are the really exciting bits where you never quite know where you're going to end up in a coaching conversation, and that's what makes it thrilling, challenging, and why clients come back to it, because every client is different, every interaction is is different. So I'm just giving an example there of, remembering that coaching is a creative process. It's a creative exchange between people. So even when you offer an activity or a concept, it may be a doorway to something else. Just because you ask a question about emotions does not mean that you're going to end up working on emotions, but it might be a question that needs to be asked in order to open the door into this other space that's right at the root of what a client is facing as their biggest challenge at that particular time. And it might also be, it might also help a client to identify that if they were to explore this idea that they can choose their emotions, that it takes away a pattern of behavior, which might be around projecting things, their internal things onto other people. And so if you can choose it yourself, then you sort of, you hold on to it rather than projecting it out. And what I mean by that is sometimes if we are resisting something within ourselves, we may see resistance in other people, and that may be the only thing that we can see, and it's because we can't accept it as part of ourselves. And so the only way to make contact with it and try and resolve some of it is projecting it out to somebody else, often done unconsciously, not consciously. But again, that's some of the nuances of the depth that you can work out with clients and the level of support and insight that you can help people to get to enable them to become, as you said earlier, Zoe, response able. So able to respond in a way that is most honoring of who they are, who they want to be, their current life, the future life, which they want to create by design, that is maybe a little bit more or a little bit less of something. So yeah, I think I've personally find those parts of coaching really fascinating.
I think that part you said about responsibility is really important when it comes to this principle. And I can remember once, probably several times, if my husband's listening, like having a proper like shouting, not even a shouting match, because he wasn't shouting back, but I'm shouting him. I'm stressed basically, and I'm shouting at him for something. Can't remember what. I think he'd polished my shoes wrong or something stupid. It's the straw that breaks the camel's back. And I remember him saying something like, "You can choose your emotions." And in that moment, I was like, yeah, and I'm choosing to be angry, whatever it was. Anyway, later it was all fine. We laughed about it. And I texted him later saying, look, I'm clearly stressed. Don't know what was happening before. But it's so much easier for us to blame. It would be easy in that situation, be like, well, yeah, of course, because you did this and you did that and you're this and you're that, as is natural in any kind of relationship and arguments and stuff. But with this concept of you can choose your emotions does come with responsibility. Like you can't make excuses for people making you feel a certain way when you are owning your emotional response. Now, that doesn't dismiss external factors. Like external factors, of course, influence our internal environment. It's just about what do we want to take responsibility for, and how does that shape the path ahead? And if you try this on for yourself and play with it a little bit, and I think what you notice when you assign responsibility to others or situations or systemic things that are happening in the world is you get stuck very quickly. Whereas when you assign responsibility for yourself, you can see more options. Now, they might all be terrible options. They might all be options you don't want to take. But when you know that you have choice, even if the choices you make are hard, or the choices that you have to make are unsatisfactory. But if you do have choices, it gives you more of a sense of freedom, more of a sense of progress, more of a sense of being in control. And at times when it can feel like you have none of those things can be hugely valuable. So this principle, when used well, can be really liberating for people in what can feel like very difficult times. So yeah, encourage you to play with it and try it out.
And of course, this is we can only cover so much in a short podcast around the how. So if this resonates with you, and you're like, oh, I'd really like some resources on the how, and I'd like some deeper understanding on the why, then you are obviously more than welcome to come and join us on our emotions coaching practitioner training. It's accredited with the ICF, and you can find details on our next cohort and how to book at igcompany.com/emotions coaching. If that's not where you're at in your journey right now, and you're just starting to look at coaching and you can see that it's got so much to offer you and the people that you work with, our business In Good Company also offers accredited coaching qualifications that are accredited by the ICF, the EMCC, and our level 7 also accredited with the Association for Coaching. And the best way to start to find out about which of those courses is right for you is to come and take our quiz at mycoachingcourse.com.